This is such a juicy conversation. Honestly, we should be on the streets right now because there is literally no lawfully binding precedent that establishes any corporate personhood through the Constitution that validates the existence of Citizens United. The interesting thing is that even if Citizens United was overturned, there would still be that precedent that actually gave that justification, which is literally just the Supreme Court judges. An 1886 court case titled Santa Clara County versus Southern Pacific Railroad Company, where basically Southern Pacific Railroad Company didn't want to pay California taxation because they said, hey, we're people, so you're discriminating against us under the Equal Protection Clause. And basically the justices within this case said, hey, you don't have to convince us, Southern Pacific Railroad Company, that corporations are people, because everyone here in this courtroom believes that the Equal Protection Clause was meant to include corporations. So you don't even have to convince us about that. Now, this assertion was not legally binding. However, the courts have run with it. And the interesting thing is because this comment was from my court video, which literally positions the absolute contradictions of how our courts work. But basically, judges said, trust me, bro, I believe you. And after that, we've just allowed for corporate personhood to be a thing without any legally binding arguments. By originalism, which I believe originalism at its purest interpretation is a fucking threat to the people. Because what the corporate personhood actually position is that our Constitution is an extension also into corporations being people. However, do corporations get put on the D penalty? No. Rather, what it tells us is that the people are a means to a capitalist end. Yet when we look at our preamble, it's really focused on individuals, on people, we the people, right? And really what this tells me is that when our founding fathers wrote the social contract, they wrote it in one way. However, they didn't want it to mean in that way, which is why they position it in different ways so that it can be inclusive of the actual political agendas that they want to push. Why is it that president was not included in Section 3 of Amendment 14? Because why would you want your party's candidate to actually be the first one held accountable under this provision? Why is it that under the Constitution, Article 3 for the judiciary, it's incomplete? And wow, in that Article 3, it positions that judges should be there for good behavior. What we know from Federalist 83 is that this good behavior literally means that they're in alignment with the Constitution. So as long as a judge is in alignment with the Constitution, then they should be there for life. Now, instead of having a removal clause, like we should have, Alexander Hamilton positioned that if we had it, then the judges wouldn't do their job because they feel like they wouldn't do their job because why do their job when they can be removed? It makes no sense. It makes no sense. This is the same logic for why they gave presidents, aka Donald Trump, presidential immunity. Because if a president thinks that they can be prosecuted, they're not going to abide by the peaceful transfer of power because they think they can be prosecuted. It makes no fucking sense. Why are Republicans holding up Joe Biden's SAFE plan, which is basically to allow American students with debt to pay less on their student loans? Because if Americans with student debt are relieved, then who will pay Mohela, the Missouri-based student loan company? Who's going to pay this person under the Equal Protection Clause of Mohela? So rather than relieve thousands and millions of fucking students, we're going to protect one company. It makes no logic. And why are we doing that? Because of corporate personhood, of course, which literally has no legal basis. Except for tradition and except for the judges saying, because I said so. And why can we not challenge that? I mean, we can lawfully, but what are we going to say? Judges have judicial immunity, which literally says that even if they make a decision based on malintent, they cannot be held accountable. Which is funny because in Federalist 78, Alexander Hamilton positions that the courts are the weakest branch of our government. Yes, in our experience, they're the most powerful. Why? Because there's no constitutional regulation over it. Why? Because Article 3 is incomplete. This means that there is no independence in the courts. Why? Because the courts depend on Congress to create their blueprint because Article 3 is incomplete. But as a reality, courts are supposed to check Congress and Congress is supposed to create the courts. How is that independent? The complicated thing is that we can remove corporate personhood by invoking Article 5, the Amendment Clause. However, if we go through it through the legislative route, it's going to happen the same thing as the Equal Rights Amendment, which is still being held up. Literally, the only thing it has to be done is for it to be published. People are telling Joe Biden to publish it. I think most likely than not he will, but I think he's waiting for the perfect timing, which really it really frustrates me because it's very symbolic. It's very political strategy. It's not like women aren't wanting relief and protection right now, right? He needs to do it at a specific time so that he can be remembered for this, and it pisses me off. However, Congress can slack on that. The other opportunity is a convention of the states, but progressives are scared of this because they fear that conservatives will use this in order to basically dilute and eliminate the United States Constitution. But in not fixing our shortcomings, we're doing the same thing. But also you have to ask yourself, does the Democratic Party under the DNC also benefit from Citizens United? And it does, because who else will fund it? It doesn't want to remove it, otherwise it would be a priority. Yes, there are Democrats who want it, but again, when I criticize the Democratic Party, I'm criticizing the governance, so the DNC, the Democratic National Committee, because they are the ones who create that agenda, that governance. What's the difference between green energy funding a Democratic politician and oil funding a conservative politician? There isn't, because there's still a corporation having influence in politics over the people, because then they don't want to listen to individuals, they want to listen to the big donors. And as such, that agenda will reflect the big donor interests rather than the people who are only giving like $5, $20. In this reality, it is a bipartisan political status quo that is being upheld because it benefits both parties and maintaining dominance of the political sphere. Both Citizens United and the Electoral College creates the lesser two evils. But here's the thing, when these decisions are made by our branches that are misaligned to our actual original intentions as a social contract, we just allow for it to happen. South Korea rejected impeaching the president who moved to have martial law. Instead of just accepting it like Americans would, thousands blocked the streets as South Korean president survives impeachment because they're like, fuck no, you're gonna do it again. You're gonna do it again until you get it right. We don't. We don't. And the question becomes, what is it going to take to get us in the streets at a mass scale level? Because South Korea understands in recent memory how it is to live under a dictatorship, under a tyranny, but we haven't had it since the 1700s. Like, I know we've had a lot of shit in regards to injustice, but it's not the same as a dictatorship, as a tyranny. So I think we're just chill. We're just like, okay, I guess the courts decided, Congress decided, the Senate decided not to impeach Donald Trump. We should have done it then, but we didn't because we're like, I guess the government is working how it should be. And as a result, we get fucked. We get fucked every single time because we allow for the political status quo. And that's a problem. The status quo is bad when it is misaligned to the constitutional status quo, because that is what has to be restored. It's not even about me saying, let's go to the right, let's go to the left. Let's go to the balance of what's required in the constitutional reality and then build on top of that, rather than moving that totally to the right or even totally to the left, because we should have a balance. But that balance is for we the people, actual individuals. The reality that corporations were included in this personhood was very specific to the interests of particular people. Judges saying, I knew that corporations were people, so we're not even going to argue about this. You don't have to give me evidence that corporations are people because we all believe it in this courtroom. It's not evidence. And that's what I hate about American law, that if a judge says something, you're just like, okay, I guess it's true. I guess Brock Turner should only get 6 months because 20 minutes of fun. It's absolutely, I don't even know how to defend that. It's not right.